Thank you very much indeed, Cindy. I'm your straight white male moderator for the night. I knew Cindy was going to be a tough act to follow. I'm just going to say a few words before we get going. We're doing this standing up bar format again to keep the energy up, and I think it's going to be an interesting debate tonight. It's nice to be talking about, or to get our teeth into this, into the diversity issue. As most of you, or some of you might know, we often sit here talking on issues of sustainability. I'm going to talk a little bit, very quickly, about a McKinsey report that I'm sure most of you have read. It was from earlier this year, but I just want to pick up on a few little bits and pieces from that will inform our discussion this evening. When I was reading, doing a little bit of research for this evening, I came across this question. If you told a CEO that a new type of machine or a piece of software would make their business more productive, they'd probably buy it, right? Well, here's my question. If you gave that same CEO research showing that companies with more diverse workforces perform better financially, would they be as quick to ensure a more diverse workforce? Maybe, maybe not. And if not, why not? That's something we will ask all of our panel this evening. As I said, the research is from McKinsey. It's worth sharing just a couple of other bits and pieces from it, if you bear with me. Companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity, 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. For gender diversity, 15%. In the UK, greater gender diversity on the senior executive team corresponded, and this is a real eye-opener, I think, to the highest performance uplift in the survey. For every 10% increase in gender diversity, EBIT rose 3.5%. Now, I guess the gist seems to be that companies embracing diversity make better decisions and innovate faster. And innovate is important here. It's something we'll also talk about tonight. It's something Tim Cook at Apple has talked a lot about as well. So tonight we ask, is diversity the killer app? How crucial an ingredient is it to a company's success? Is it to innovation in that company? There seems to be a lot of evidence relating to the why it's the right course to take. And I'm glad Cindy touched on a bit of the how as well, because how do you execute something like this, a strategy like this successfully, has to be one of the questions we will address this evening. Do you address one part of it, say gender first, and then move on to the other parts of it? I suspect we will be talking about gender a little bit more than the other parts of it tonight. So I want to try and push it in the other direction. What we're going to do, as I said, I'm going to invite our panelists up one by one. We'll have a quick chat here. They'll move to the bar area, and we will then have a discussion after that. We'll then open it up to Q&A as we always do. I know there are a couple of Thomson Reuters people in this audience as well, so if no one's asking questions, I'm going to point at you two. Just prepare yourselves. Ronan Dunne is Chief Executive, come on up Ronan, is Chief Executive of Telefonica O2, regarded as a leading figure when it comes to embedding social and environmental issues in decision making. Welcome, Ronan.
Thank you.
Let me start with this. Is your focus at Telefonica O2 on diversity driven by doing the right thing, or is there a hard-nosed business case behind this?
So some of you may have heard me speak here before on sustainability, and Jim always quotes this back to me. I just like enlightened self-interest. I think it's a great driver of the right thing to do. We're in the business of matching talent to opportunity. One of the Cindy statistics that you quoted was, in the UK, I think it's 80% of consumer goods purchasing is done by women. Mm-hmm. I have 25 million customers. If I want to perform in this market where there's scarcity of capital, there's competition for customers, there's also competition for the talent, human capital, then I've got to be in the business of making sure that I can match the best talent to the best opportunities our business has. And my belief in doing that is, if my business doesn't look, feel and act like the market it's trying to excel in, then it has little chance of doing that.
Am I right in saying that O2 does focus more on the gender diversity rather than the other groups?
No, so we've got 3 programs we're running at the moment. We've got a Women in Leadership program, which we focus on. We've got an LGBTQ program, but we've also got a carers program, because actually one of the things that we've worked out is you need to create the conditions in the work environment where people can be their best self and recognize that that's not the same for everybody. And what we also recognize is that success is often defined by male characteristics. Actually, success needs to be defined on the terms of the individual who you're trying to create the space to be successful. So what we're trying to do is, if you work on one element of diversity, I think you create an environment in which you're more conscious of the others, and it has a catalytic effect.
Okay, so you start with gender, say, and then you start working on the other bits. Okay.
So we started with ethnic diversity for leadership, making an Irishman the CEO of a UK business.
There you go. What are your peers at other companies and the boards and the execs, what are they still doing wrong, do you think?
So I think if you look across our industry, and I'll be challenging, look at our own parent company, we have a third women on the board. That's 3. That's the magic number, as Cindy rightly said. There's one female in 29, I think, on the public board for Telefonica. I think the challenge is that the presumption is that we're in a technology and engineering business, a STEM business, and therefore we're serving a male need. The reality is we're in the experience business, and actually that's something that generally is much more focused on a broader and diverse target group. One of the things that's interesting is even your brand. You know, I've talked to analysts in our industry. Brands are characterized as male or female. We actually have a brand that is seen as much more open and diverse, and therefore is more attractive to a broader reach of people. And that's why we've outperformed our marketplace for pretty much every quarter of the last 10 years, because we've managed to create the conditions in which more people feel that we're a relevant brand to them. People do business with brands they trust. Yeah. I think others have taken the view that they're trying to sell product, and an engineering-led product, which tends to be male.
You mentioned the Women in Leadership program. A recent report, and you're going to share this with other peers in the industry. Something that might help your business case in the end, something that might help the bottom line. Why? It's something we've talked about before on the sustainability front. Sharing, collaboration, radical openness was a panel we did here as well. Is it in your best interest to share that?
Well, I think it is. I think we want to create the conditions in which, I don't believe you should succeed in business because you're simply hiding the failures of others. I think you should have the confidence in your business that if you do the right thing for your customers, you're going to succeed anyway. And I think for all of us, if we create a better marketplace, one that produces a better mousetrap that everybody's interested in, I think that's good. So whether it be the sustainability agenda, whether it be the diversity agenda, I think the challenge, though, is what we're trying to do is call out the fact that, and this is not making excuse for white male boards, is there is a lot of unconscious bias, and I think creating an environment in which we get more visibility of where that unconscious bias is. Simple things like when we recruit, how you write that ad will determine who applies for the job. Sure. The fact that we insist on having gender balanced shortlists when we recruit externally, simple things like that can make a difference. And actually, I think those are the sort of things that we should be talking about more broadly.
Very quickly to finish up, what's the main reason for failure in this space, would you say? Getting it wrong.
I think 2 things. I think if it's not actually believed at the top, you know what, you can't put lipstick on a pig.
Right.
You've got to be willing to do things that actually change the entire culture of an organization. And things like creating the work environment, flexible working, other things, all part of a package. And what I think sometimes happens is, and CSR is like this, sustainability can be like it as well, somebody tries to greenwash the situation.
Right.
It never works.
You talk very quickly, you talk about getting the people at the top to believe in this. Cindy talked, of course, that this is bottom up, not top down. Do you agree with that?
I think two things. I think the action can be bottom up, and I think we probably don't have time for it now, but I think the way you organize people in a business, social capital rather than human capital, I think can change the way the organization changes from the bottom, because you change the way people interact at every level in the organization, and that can be a catalyst. Because outcomes, if people believe they're going to get a better outcome, they will go for it. It was your point about, if I can buy a faster machine, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
If people see they get a better outcome, even men will work out that they'll change the team, change the skills that are available to them, change the way they work and the environment that they work in.
But and you can't argue with that McKinsey report, I guess, the numbers.
No, absolutely.
All right, Ronan, please
Thank
come
you.
stand over here. Thank you very much indeed, Ronan. Right, next up is Julie Chakravarti, Non-Executive Director at Aberdeen Asset Management. Julie, come on up. Julia's also chair of the Innovation Committee at Aberdeen, formerly with UBS and JP Morgan, and I'm reliably told by Julie, the last time we met, I was handing some award over to you for something. I can't remember what it was, but thank you very much indeed for coming. I want to start with innovation, because I mentioned it a couple of times in my open, and you chair this committee at Aberdeen. In practical terms, talk to us about the connection between diversity and innovation that so many people talk about.
I think there's a huge connection, Axel, and I'll tell you why. I mean, the best innovation ideas come through trying to peek around the corner and really trying to look at an old problem in a new way. And if you think about it, how are you going to look through a new lens if everyone has the same perspective? So you've got to think, you're selling to a very big, wide world. You've got to think like those people, anticipate their needs, so you've got to hire from them. And a great example is within the Innovation Committee. We ran a competition recently on talent, and we said, give us some ideas, let's crowdsource around the company how we could grow our talent model differently and make it more diverse. And we had great ideas on what we should be putting on YouTube, what skills we should be teaching, not assuming. And when I looked at this, I thought, oh my God, these are fantastic ideas to take to the board. But I noticed that many, many ideas, more than half were from women, and they were from all around the world. So I realized it was that difference that was creating the spark.
You're involved in a startup, you just got back from Palo Alto. What's the environment there, for example, in terms of diversity, innovation, compared to, say, here in London at an asset management company or in the financial services sector?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, Palo Alto is very much a force field. The innovation is phenomenal. And you really sense a creativity and an urgency that, to be honest, we don't always have here. That was very positive. Diversity was shockingly, underwhelming. So I spent a day on a 10,000 strong campus of, let's call it a really big social network, we'll leave it there. Very few female engineers, very few. And what I liked was actually they used their data openly. They make every single team show gender ratios. Startups, very, very difficult to recruit women. I was recently a judge at a tech award. We had about 20-25 founders and presenters, maybe 2 women, even in fashion and retail apps.
Why is it like that in the tech sector?
It's a really, really hard one. I mean, historically, we've had this issue. I'm a trustee of a very large educational establishment, 20,000 girls, so this is close to my heart. But clearly, women felt tech careers were something for geeks and nerds. They clearly didn't go into it. I think now that with the proliferation of social, mobile apps, people can see that technology is a value add, it's entrepreneurial, they will come. But clearly, they've not been there, and only 12% of the tech workforce in the UK is female. That sector is going to have a disproportionate impact on the economy, and the EU is going to have a 1 million worker shortage, so we've got to fix this.
I want to finish up with this. There's been some criticism in the UK hiring non-execs rather than execs to make it seem as though this diversity is happening. Do you agree with that criticism? Is it a problem?
I don't think so. I mean, the non-execs have an absolutely crucial role in holding management to account for the delivery of the strategy and the diversity agenda. As non-execs, we chair, and I certainly do, a remuneration committee, the nomination committees, so we will call out bad practices, we will demand data, but we also oversee the processes. So if you think about it, we've got to make sure to enact Cindy's points, those micro actions, You know, do you advertise all roles internally? Often that doesn't happen, makes a big difference. How do you communicate rejection? So there was a study that showed that women are much more sensitive if they perceive a rejection was unfair. They won't apply to that company. Men don't have that issue.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, if the processes which non-execs oversee and all the remuneration and the nominations are not overseen, I think that would be very negative. So I don't see it as a negative if we focus
All
on
right, and a
non-execs.
final point, it's something I came across, and I hadn't heard this phrase, the issue of multiple non-execs. Small pools of women who sit on a number of boards. Again, it sort of muddies the numbers somewhat. Is that a problem?
Again, I'm not sure. So the data that's coming through shows that what we're trying to do is bring through new generations of actually men and women, you know, diverse ages, diverse nationalities. In the regulated sectors, financial services, it's tough because you get interviewed by the regulator and you need to show sort of very specific skill sets. But even there, you know, we're bringing through new people all of the time. So I encourage everyone to pursue a portfolio career, and I think you're only going to see, you know, a multitude of new faces coming forward.
Okay, very good. Julie,
Thank you
very much
Axel.
indeed. Right, Bella. Bella, there you are. Bella Vuliemos is Director of Women in Leadership at Sky. You were previously on the sustainability team. I know they did not want to let you go at Sky, so you're brought in this role. Very nice to see you.
Hi.
Why, just a big general question, why having a gender-balanced workforce? Why is that so important to you at Sky?
Well, I think we've covered it quite a lot already this evening, but you know, at Sky, we see this through a very hard business performance lens. We're not in the business of diversity, we're in the business of leveraging diversity in order to drive business performance, so at least that's my job. And the reason why we've decided to do that is that there's a myriad of research externally that shows you that business outcomes are better if you have a more diverse group at the top of the organisation, and indeed throughout the organisation. We've talked a lot about that tonight. And that's also been the case within our organisation. We've seen that when we have, for example, more women within teams, we have a better approach to work, better work ethic, the way that the work gets done is better, but also better business outcomes. It's impossible for us as a consumer-facing organisation with millions and millions of customers, as Ronan was saying, to come up with really innovative new ideas if we don't have a group of talent at the top and throughout the organisation who can reflect and anticipate needs.
You have focused very much on women.
Yes.
Why did you start there, and how quickly can we imagine, or can you imagine, you'll start addressing the other parts of this?
And the whole gamut of diversity is really important to us at Sky. So what we've chosen to do is supercharge women in order to try and move the dial significantly and faster on that area before moving elsewhere.
And you won't move elsewhere until you've made this one work?
Yeah.
And how long is that going to take?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see. We would envisage probably moving on within, say, a year. We expect the change in numbers to take some time. We've got a third of the top 500 are women at the moment, and we want to get to 50-50, which is quite a big challenge. We're not going to wait until we get there. It's going to take some time. What we do want to do is make sure that the plan that we put in place is embedded and owned within the business. So it's led very much from the top by Jeremy, our chief exec. It has 2 senior exec sponsors. We have all of the exec across the business involved, and then a working group of people who are championing the initiative right across the organisation. Because as we've heard tonight, you need leadership from the top, but you also need a groundswell within the organisation, and particularly at line management level as well.
And have you a little bit leading this question, but have you tried other parts of this diversity piece and failed, and therefore left them for the time being and focused on women?
I think what we've done is we have tried to do everything and not moved anything far or fast enough. So that is why we've chosen to focus on one area and really deliver that.
And to finish up, again, it's coming back to the how. I'd like to hear a little bit from you on how you execute a strategy like this. Again, Cindy touched on this. The why is pretty obvious. The how, to me, seems less obvious. What could you share with us that might inform some of those people here tonight?
Well, first of all, we have leadership from the top, which, as I've said, is I think, really important. We also went out and talked to the organisation. So we went out and talked to the leadership group as a whole about what we're doing and got their input, but we surveyed all the women within the top 500 as well and did in-depth interviews with them. And Emma Avignon, who's here with us tonight, helped us with that from Mentor. And what we heard back from those women was that there were 3 key issues that they wanted help with, and they're not going to surprise anyone in this room who's involved in diversity. One is that they wanted help to address self-limiting beliefs. Secondly, they thought we weren't doing enough around mentoring and sponsoring through formal programs. It was all too informal. And thirdly, they wanted help with informal flex, so helping them take control of their work and when and where they do that. So that was really helpful for us, and we use that as a basis to build our program. So we've got a sponsorship and development program where women who are high potential and high performance get an exec or exec -1 sponsor right at the top of the organisation, whose job it is to challenge their career thinking, help them develop their career plan. And then critically, the rubber hits the road, they need to go out and help them find those opportunities alongside development program, which enables them to identify and then eliminate and eradicate their self-limiting beliefs, as well as helping on the flex that we talked about earlier.
Okay, Bella, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Cindy, why don't you come up and join us? And we'll open this up into a slightly broader discussion. And as I said, then we'll throw it out to you, the audience. Cindy, pick up on something you heard there that either surprised you or worried you.
Sure. Well, actually, I'd like to pick up on the point of discussion between you and Julie about why there aren't more women in tech. Because that is the result of a number of dynamics, some of which are a lot less obvious and less publicly discussed. It's absolutely true that women in STEM goes all the way back to school, and it's a sad fact of life that you will get many more girls going into computer science engineering classes when teenage boys think girls who do that are hot and dateable, as opposed to thinking they're geeky and nerdy and not the cool girls. You know. But equally, one of the reasons I emphasize bulk buy as a critical how, and I absolutely exhort, this is a numbers game. Do everything you can to get to environments in whatever context, working, team, leadership conferences that are at least 50-50 male, female, if not more female than male. Because the moment you do that, you manage out a whole number of things that have a very negative impact on women. For example, you manage out instantly sexual harassment. That is a huge issue in every single male-dominated workplace and industry, including the tech world. And the reason you manage that out when you have a 50-50 gender equal environment is because in an environment where men are engaging with women of equal stature, equal professionalism, equal talents, you cease to view women, as you do in a male-dominated environment, as one of only 2 things, girlfriend or secretary. In traditionally male-dominated work environments, a woman can only be one of those 2 things, and that's where a lot of sexual harassment comes from. Your point, Ronan, about unconscious bias, equally, there was a great piece written by a writer in New York Magazine about the notorious Ellen Pao case. Ellen Pao sued Kleiner Perkins for sexism in Silicon Valley. And the piece is called, do look it up, Ellen Pao and the Sexism You Can't Quite Name. Every day for women in the workplace, all workplaces, there is a tax and a toll that is taken through many, many microaggressions, microbiases, often unconscious, but they absolutely play their part in managing women out of businesses and industries. And so I just wanted to highlight that for the audience because there are many more things going on there than not enough women taking up, computer science or engineering.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Just one thing to build on Cindy's comments, not to take us completely off piste, but one of the things that we've recognised, we go into schools and talk about digital skills and digital literacy and encouraging young women as well as young men into businesses like ours and generally into the space. You find, and there's a correlation I think to the STEM as well, is that parents have analog ambitions for their children, and sometimes some of the bias that you're having to deal with as an employer is actually bred from bias that sits in the home and the expectation towards the children. So not one for us to go into now, but it's one that we have to recognise. We have to deal with the ambitions from the home so that we can then build on that in the workplace.
Absolutely.
I want to come back to something that you and I talked about, Ronan, but also Bella and I. And I found it very refreshing to hear you say, Bella, that you when I asked you, had you made mistakes and therefore you leave other parts of this and focus on gender to start with. And it was you saying that realization that you want to really get every part of this right, so do it one step at a time. Have you felt the same way in Telefonica?
So I think two parts of that. I think trying to do everything at once is wrong, and at the risk of repeating myself, you have to create an environment in which there's space for change, and that's around. So one of the things we said was, if we focus on the work environment, the flexibility of the work environment, the way we recruit and promote people, you start to create conditions in which you're addressing all of the diversity issues. And then you build programs that go to the elements of the diversity agenda which are specific, whether it be confidence, whether it be some other elements which tend to be specific to one particular aspect. But you have to create an environment in the workplace that is already starting to address not just like us, not recruit like us, not act like us. Unless you do that, then any of your programs are going to fail anyway.
I think that's right, if I may.
Yeah, please.
And I thought, Cindy is dead right about calling this out. So at board level, we will get people pitching to us, whether it be broker, audit, tender, remuneration, a whole host of things. And we actually will take a zero tolerance line if we have 4 or 5 pitches from people, frankly, 5 white old guys sitting there banging on the table when there are 4 women on our board. And you think, what do you not get? You've clearly looked at our website before coming in, and it's very, very strange, because they don't reflect the customer base that we want to serve, and they don't reflect us. But Ronan, they clearly not noticed this when they come in, and you think, really, you couldn't even find one woman to come along with you to this pitch.
Think about the optics even.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we need to call this out, and I think, to Cindy's point, if you can fix it on the women, you've actually fixed most of it, because people want to see that you're serious. And it's very simple to go, I can look at that and I can see who's a man and who's a woman. Is this working or not? And there has to be a zero tolerance around it, because otherwise it's just lovely words and lovely speeches and nothing will change.
I talked about this McKinsey report, and I guess my question is where you think the business case for diversity is most evident. Is it through the innovation process, as we talked about, employee engagement, customer stickiness? Something we often talk about when we're doing the sustainability piece here is investors, shareholders, investing in companies that they feel are doing the right thing morally. What's most important in this space, would you say? Anyone?
But actually, can I answer that?
Yeah.
The single most important thing in this space, and by the way, this comes out of the fact that I'm a huge believer in communication through demonstration. Every single issue that we are talking about here goes away when you prove that diversity makes an absolute goddamn shit ton of money. This is why, in the tech context, I say I want to see women founders making huge exits from startups. I want to see women founders raising the kind of rounds of funding that men do. I want to see a woman at the top of the Vanity Fair, top 100 influence list, along with Steve and Larry and Sergey and Mark. Because honestly, everything falls away when you have, whether it's women or African Americans or Hispanics or Latinos or whatever, proving that they are making huge amounts of money in whatever context. You'll be amazed how quickly these barriers fall away.
Okay, so it all comes back to the money thing then, doesn't it? I guess part of my question is the money piece, the business case is one thing, but how comfortable do businesses and leaders of businesses feel talking about the moral side of this, taking a moral stance on diversity?
I think the moral side of it drops out the bottom. It's just a good outcome that it's the right thing to do, and it's part of being a responsible business. I think it's much more useful going in on the commercial side, and that is reality. This is a good thing to do for your business, and it also takes away any of the buy-in issues that you might have. I wondered with this role whether I might be pushing water up a hill with certain individuals in the business, certain areas, and in fact what I found is that everyone buys into it, because they either get the business case or they feel it's the right thing to do, or in most cases both. And I think coming at it from a kind of doing the right thing perspective actually would do this a disservice. It's more straightforward than that.
I think, taking your challenge head on, I think sometimes one of the issues, it crystallizes around things like quotas. Because I think that's one where you can have a very strong debate about whether or not a quota in the face of it is doing the right thing. Does it actually lead to the outcome that you want? And look, different people have different views, but in my experience of all of the senior women that I've discussed the question of quotas with, all of them have either explicitly said don't agree or have had serious concerns about the risk of it undermining the credibility of successful senior women as they come through the process. However, all of them also would say is we're not making enough progress fast enough. So there's inside the moral dilemma of surely we should do it, there is a moral dilemma in itself about the pace and how we do it in order that we get an outcome that's itself sustainable.
Can I
Yeah,
make
go.
a slightly contrary point on the moral? You almost need to consider the moral irrespective of commercial, and sometimes it's not commercial. And I'll give you an example, tax. So most boards, we sit around an audit committee, how can we pay a little bit less tax? That is our job. That's what shareholders want you to do. Now the moral and social imperative is flipped on its head. Tax avoider, that's bad. That's a moral imperative. So companies are much more sensitive to the moral issue. Actually, regardless of whether it's commercial, you're not going to hire anyone to come and work for you if you have bad working practices, if you're seen to be elitist or sexist or racist. So I really wouldn't underplay the moral. I think this is the zeitgeist for companies to stand up for their values, to have mission-led companies, even at the expense sometimes. Frankly, it may not be that commercial in the short run. That moral imperative is more important now.
Short-term and long-term performance, isn't it?
And also, I do just want to push back on the quota credibility point, because and you said this yourself, Rona, we are not moving fast enough, so we need affirmative action. And B, I hear from women all the time, oh, I don't want to be hired just because I'm a woman. And my response to that is, get over it, because all around you are mediocre men who are hired just because they were men. Get hired because you're a woman, and then prove that you're bloody brilliant at whatever it is you were hired at.
But what?
Axel, I've got to add to that. Again, reiterate that. Getting hired and appointed is the easy bit. Absolutely. Get over it. Oh, look, I'm on a board. That was the really easy bit. Now you're there for 9 years. You have to be able to do the job.
Well, that's right.
So you've got to lose this sensitivity. I read this amazing statistic that actually I think it was from the CIPD and the 30% Club, but that you guys, helped to author. It said 25% of women feel a stigma to attend a leadership development program. So my message to anyone out there is, if you're lucky enough to go on a bloody leadership development program, man or woman, go. Because once you're appointed, nobody remembered or cared or noticed that you went on it. If it helped you to do the job, you owe it to yourself and your company to go. This is a misplaced sensitivity.
And this is all about levelling the playing field anyway. No business in its right mind is going to be hiring or progressing lots of women who aren't good enough to do the job. They're trying to find the very best women that they have, the very best women out there in the market, and helping them progress further and faster.
Is trying on the part of the company enough? I think there are a number of companies who have put in place, I'm not naming any names, programs to bring in ethnic minorities, to bring in more women, and it has not worked. They've made a good show of it, though, and people have applauded that. But you need to see results. So again, back to the how. If it doesn't work at the beginning, i.e. those people aren't the right people for the job, they're not at the end interested in the job, and we talked about the media students, how do you make it work?
Well, first of all, you need to be sure that you're not basing success or failure on one or two examples in the company. And also to do this, we've decided to do it at scale. We believe in fewer, bigger, better. We tend to be not very good at fewer. We're doing fewer in this case because we're just focusing on women, but we definitely want to be doing it bigger and better. So we want to get on and move as fast as we can in the right way to drive a sustainable change. So it will take time for those results to come through, and we will be championing those results each time they come through. And where we get stuck, we'll look into the data and work out why we're stuck and find another way of doing it. But I think being really clear about where you are today, where you're going, and progressively tracking progress towards the end result, but really being committed over the long term. This is a long-term goal, although we want to get there as quickly as possible.
Sure.
This builds on Julie's point about being recruited is only the start. Actually, in some respects, I could go out and address a lot of things recruiting tomorrow, but if I don't create the conditions inside the workplace where people actually want to stay and progress, and there's 3 or 4 components of that. One is, strong role models, and let me be controversial here, that not all women at the top are seen as role models by women coming through organisations or coming through. So we've got to evidence the fact that success on your own terms is something that is applicable. And forgive me, I tell a very short story. A lady that many of you may know, Amanda Suri at Unilever, tells the story when she talks about this, that she came to a certain time in her career and in her family life where she went to her boss and said, now it won't work anymore, so I need to go home and I need to look after my children. And he turned around to her and he said, and she tells this story, he said, you haven't come and asked me what it would take for you to stay in the workplace. Now basically bugger off, work that out and come back and ask me. And she did, and he did, and she stayed.
I could not agree with that more, because I get very annoyed when people talk about the mummy track, okay? Women leave the workforce absolutely not because of families and children. They leave the workforce because they look at the tops of the company they work for, the industry they work in, they see a closed loop of white guys talking to white guys about other white guys, and any sensible woman goes, who the fuck would ever want to work like that? And that's why we need to redesign the system, because the entire corporate structure at the moment that exists was predicated on the concept of the housewife. The entire corporate system, as it's built up over decades, began at a time when it was assumed that men would always be the ones going to work, and there would always be a woman at home taking care of everything else. Today, everything's changed, but the fundamental system and structure hasn't. And so when we redesign the entire corporate structure around gender equality, as I said, we create a happier working place for men as much as for women.
Yeah, you're going to lose, if you don't fix the system, you will lose the best men as well as the best women, because people want to have a multitude of interests. They have elderly parents, one of whom may be in hospital. They may have children. They may want to travel. You've got to fix the system. And this idea of dual career marriages is very important. And actually, to young girls now, one thing we teach them at the Girls' Day School Trust is find the right husband who's going to support you. That's already something that we can help them to think about career planning. It's got to be a partnership. So we've got to fix the system and not think about trying to fix the women.
Who should own diversity in the business? This often sits within the HR function. You're smiling, Ronan. Is this...
Look, it's a bit like who owns the customer. You know, when my HR director was being appointed,
So it doesn't matter.
She said she wanted to be the people director, and I said everybody in the business has to be a people director. So you can't change your job title. I think it has to be everybody. What we do have is we have exec sponsorship as you do, and I think that's really important because guess what? People know it's important when there is an exec sponsor who has some of his personal outcomes or her personal outcomes determined by whether or not they succeed on a program like this. But I think it has to be something that everybody in the business is aware of, and then there needs to be a program that allows everybody in the business to be involved.
And is it realistic to expect everyone in the business, in the organisation, to own this agenda?
It has to be realistic. There's no choice, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
But
at the end of the day, we at Sky will only progress if line managers choose to make different hiring and promotional decisions. The rest of it is all icing on the cake. Won't really change anything unless at the point of hire, at the point of promotion, line managers advertise. Yeah. They run balanced shortlists and they choose the best person from the broadest possible talent.
Is it happening?
And then, sorry, I just want to add to that. And then, very important, and this goes even beyond the word sponsor, and then you need them to champion. Yeah. So one of the things, and again I have to say this to women particularly all the time, strike the word mentor from your vocabulary. Women do not need mentors, we need champions. And we need champions who are men, because they're the ones at the top, and we need the kind of champion who, behind the closed boardroom door, will slam his fist on the table and go, there's only room left for one pay rise in the department, Jill gets it, not John. We don't have enough champions, who don't just hire and don't just manage, but also will actually go out, will do what white men get all the time, they will go out on a limb for women, for minorities, for LGBT, whoever, and they will publicly and visibly champion those people and actively want to see them progress in the organisation.
And around tables that those people can't get to.
Yeah, precisely.
But recognise as well, the mentoring role is key, because where do you find said champion? There are some tricks of the trade. How do you navigate the system you're in? You're not going to change it overnight. You've got to thrive and flourish in the platform that's already there. So I think you need both.
What are some of those tricks?
How long do you have?
Well, just give us an example, something practical.
I think a lot of it is to stop self-deprecating. If you put a man and a woman together to talk about something, I can talk a bit, I've been in retail boards, financial services, women often can't resist apologising, putting themselves down. They don't like the silence. A man will just stand there, take all of the credit. Women tend to feel, a colleague of mine in a bank, not BAML, a different bank, said, well, we looked at our website and we saw who was showing an interest at the grad level and then who went on to apply. I had a look at it. This is fascinating. Lots more women showed an interest, didn't apply. They got all the women back for an event, mingled, like they said, do you mind just telling us what changed from showing the interest to not applying? They said, oh, well, when we looked at the page that had all of the requirements, there were 10, we didn't quite fit all 10. Okay, interesting. Let's go back to the men. Let's ask them the same question. What do you think most of the men said? What requirements? Okay?
Yep.
Didn't even care. Didn't occur to them.
Right.
So these are some of the tricks. You do not need to meet all the
Women,
requirements.
do what men
Go
do.
forward.
Bullshit the hell out of all of it. Seriously. Ask yourself, what would a straight white guy do? Do that.
Well, we took
There you are, here's one.
Julie's insight directly, and what we did was we rewrote job descriptions internally and job adverts,
Right.
because exactly the insight, if there's a list of 5, women won't apply unless they can tick at least 4. Men will find one that they have a vague relevance to and happily apply. So it's the way you write, and it's rather than saying particular relevant to either experiences, but it may be behaviors, it may be values, it may be other things that afford the opportunity to write. It's the same when we talk about things like STEM and the absence of women in STEM is. If you write it like an engineering thing, if you write some other things about we're going to change the world, we're going to reinvent, we're going to whatever, and it involves aspiration, it involves other things, then you get a completely different selection opportunity because of the people who apply. So I think that's hugely important, and that's one of the classic unconscious biases that organisations don't have. I'm going to take one thing that Cindy said earlier, if I may, and slightly disagree with this argument about leaders who have daughters or not. A variant on that is, I think those who only have daughters rather than, and where I notice it as somebody who only has daughters, unconscious bias, when you walk into a school and you see the school teams are on the board, an electronic scoreboard in the car park, and it's only the boys. The reason why? It was a boys' school and they merged with a girls' school. And every Friday for 25 years, somebody has handed in a sheet with the fixtures on it. Nobody's asked them to change it, so the person who does it is the head of boys' sport, and he does it. Nobody's ever thought of the fact that somebody's forgotten to ask the head of girls' sport that she's also supposed to put in a list. And those are the sort of things that reinforce the biases, and you've got to get those early in things like recruitment.
How optimistic are you?
Well, okay, so it's funny because I get asked variations of that question across a whole range of things in the work that I do. And no reflection on the question, I hasten to add, but that question is extremely passive because...
I'm going to ask you differently now.
Right, okay, and you should, because I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. The future is what every one of us makes it.
Yep.
And so based on, I'm assuming the willpower and determination, energy in this room to change it, I'm extremely optimistic. But it's my point about, it's not about what do you think the future holds. We make the future.
How quickly can you imagine standing up on this stage and having a completely different presentation? Because things have gone right.
As quickly as every one of us in this room and everybody in the world outside acts on this. I mean, that's the only answer. I can't predict it. It's entirely down to us. Every one of us on this stage, every one of you in the audience, any one of us can get to. And if everybody worked to change it, we could be here in a year's time looking at a very different picture. And that's all on us.
And it's not rocket science. The issues are similar across companies, across sectors, and the solutions are really similar as well. And they're packaged up very nicely in your report, actually. So we just need to